Betrayed by her husband and threatened by his mistress, a pregnant woman faces the biggest battle of her life. They try to take away her family business, her history, her name. But instead of giving in, she awakens the strength she inherited from her father. And she shows that no one should underestimate a woman at war, especially a mother. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Continuing. The wind from the Scottish Highlands blew gently through the centuries-old vineyards of the Fontaine Estate winery, carrying with it the sweet aroma of grapes hanging ripe from the branches. It was early March, harvest season, and the sky over Vineyard Valley stretched a deep blue, interrupted only by white clouds that looked like forgotten cotton across the vastness. The main house of the estate stood imposingly on the hilltop, a stone and wood construction that had withstood time. For over 100 years, a silent witness to 4 generations of the Fontaine family. Inside that house on the second floor, before a window overlooking the endless vineyards, stood Marcella. She rested her hands on her 6-month rounded belly, feeling the gentle movements of the child she carried. Her brown eyes, usually vibrant and full of determination, were clouded by an unease she couldn't name. There was something in the air, an invisible tension hovering over the house like the calm before a storm. Marcella was 32 years old, with dark hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders, and had inherited from her father not only the family's Mediterranean beauty, but also the strength of character and a deep love for that land. Her marriage to Edward Miller had taken place 3 years prior, in a ceremony that brought together the region's most traditional families. Edward was a man of striking presence, tall, with light eyes that could appear charming or cold depending on the light. He came from a family of lawyers in Edinburgh, and when he met Marcella at a business event, she was captivated by his eloquence, his apparent passion for the world of wines, and the way he made her feel special. Marcella's father, Anthony Fontaine, had expressed reservations from the beginning, but eventually yielded to his daughter's apparent happiness. Anthony had passed away just over a year ago, a victim of a sudden illness that consumed him in a matter of months, leaving Marcella as the sole heir to the wine empire he had built with his own hands. Since then, Edward had gradually assumed a more active role in the family business, presenting himself as the ideal partner, the man who would help Marcella maintain her father-in-law's legacy. At first, she had appreciated the support. Pregnant and grieving, she needed someone to trust. But in recent months, something had changed. Decisions that were once made jointly now came as fate's accomplice. Meetings from which she was excluded. Documents that Edward brought home asking for her signature without offering detailed explanations. And that look that once shone when he saw her, now seemed to pierce through her as if she were transparent, as if she were merely a temporary obstacle in his path. The bedroom door opened without warning. Edward entered with firm steps, bringing with him the scent of his expensive cologne mixed with the aroma of coffee. He wore an impeccable grey suit, as if he were about to go to an important meeting, even though it was Sunday afternoon. "Marcella, how long have you been standing here?" he asked, with a tone that tried to sound concerned but came across as impatient. "I called you 3 times for lunch." She turned slowly, her hand still on her belly. "Sorry, I was just thinking about so many things." Edward approached, but did not touch her. His eyes scanned her face like someone evaluating a painting, not like someone observing the woman he loves. "Marcella, we need to talk about something important. Tonight we'll have a special dinner. I've invited a few people." She frowned. "What people? You didn't tell me anything about a dinner." "It's a last-minute thing," he replied, looking away. "A business matter that can't wait. It will be discreet, just us and 2 guests. I need you to dress appropriately, and most importantly, to trust me." "Trust you," Marcella repeated, feeling a tightening in her chest. "Edward, I've always trusted you, but lately I feel like you're pushing me away from the company's decisions. This is my father's company, my grandfather's. I should be involved in everything." Edward sighed, running a hand through his perfectly combed hair. "You're pregnant, Marcella. Stressed. You need to take care of yourself. Take care of our child. I'm just trying to protect you from unnecessary worries. Trust me, tonight could change everything for the better." There was something in the way he said those words that made Marcella's heart race. It wasn't comfort she felt. It was alarm. But before she could respond, Edward had already left the room, leaving behind only the echo of his firm footsteps on the wooden corridor. The afternoon passed in a haze of anxiety. Marcella chose a navy blue dress, elegant yet comfortable, which accommodated her growing belly. She tied her hair in a loose bun and applied light makeup. As she got ready, she looked at herself in the mirror and tried to recognize the woman she saw reflected. Where was that vibrant Marcella who, at 25, had taken over the management of part of the winery alongside her father? Where was the girl who had learned to prune vines before learning to walk in high heels? She was still there somewhere, but seemed covered by layers of uncertainty and fear. When she descended to the main hall of the house, it was already 7 in the evening. The long dining table of noble wood, which had belonged to her great-grandfather, was set with the family's fine china, crystal glasses and candles, casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. Edward stood near the fireplace, holding a glass of red wine, and beside him was a woman Marcella didn't immediately recognize. The stranger was tall, with blonde hair cut in a modern bob, wearing an executive suit in shades of beige that screamed urban sophistication. Her eyes were a piercing green, and when she looked at Marcella, she smiled with a cordiality that didn't reach her gaze. "Marcella," Edward said, approaching to quickly kiss his wife's cheek. "Let me introduce Andrea Thompson. She's an accountant, a specialist in corporate restructuring. She's assisting us with some necessary adjustments in the winery's management." Marcella extended her hand, which was firmly grasped by the other woman. "Pleased to meet you," Marcella said, but her voice sounded distant even to her own ears. "Edward never mentioned we were working with an external consultancy." Andrea smiled again in that calculated way. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person, Marcella. Edward talks a lot about you, and congratulations on the baby. It must be such a special time." "Thank you," Marcella murmured, feeling strangely scrutinized. The doorbell rang, and the estate's groundskeeper, Mr. Jenkins, a grey-haired man who had worked for the family for over 30 years, opened the door to receive the last guest. It was a man of approximately 50 years old, bald, wearing glasses, with a leather briefcase under his arm. Edward introduced him as Dr. Sterling, a lawyer specializing in corporate law. Marcella felt the ground give way beneath her feet. A lawyer, an accountant, a business dinner she knew nothing about. What was happening? Everyone sat at the table. Dinner was served by the cook, Mrs. Eleanor, who had worked in the house since Marcella was a child. The main course was roasted lamb with garden herbs, accompanied by rustic potatoes and grilled vegetables. Edward opened a bottle of the best wine from the special vintage, the one his father had saved for extraordinary occasions. The gesture seemed like a desecration to Marcella. During the meal, the conversation revolved around pleasantries. Andrea praised the beauty of the estate. Dr. Sterling commented on the exceptional quality of the wine, and Edward conducted everything with the mastery of a perfect host. Marcella ate little, feeling the weight of the silence that hung beneath the polite words. She watched. She watched how Andrea looked at Edward. She watched how Edward avoided her gaze. She watched how Dr. Sterling discreetly checked his watch. When the plates were cleared and only the wine remained on the table, Edward cleared his throat. "Marcella, the reason we are all here today is because we need to formalize some important changes in the company's structure." "What kind of changes?" she asked, keeping her voice firm despite the internal tremor. Dr. Sterling opened his briefcase and pulled out a voluminous document, placing it on the table before Marcella. "Changes that will modernize management and ensure the winery's financial sustainability in the coming years," the lawyer explained. "With Dr. Thompson's advice, we identified that the current structure concentrates too much power in a single person, which represents financial and operational risk." Marcella picked up the document, her hands trembling slightly. She began to leaf through the pages filled with legal terms, clauses, annexes. Her eyes tried to process what she was reading, but one word repeatedly jumped from the pages: transfer. Transfer of shares, redistribution of decision-making powers, appointment of an executive director with full autonomy. "You're asking me to transfer control of the company," she said, not as a question but as a statement. "You're asking me to sign my own dismissal." Edward leaned forward, his face taking on an expression that tried to be conciliatory. "Marcella, don't be dramatic. No one is dismissing you. We are just creating a more professional structure. You will continue to be the largest shareholder, but operational decisions need to be made by someone who understands the current market." "And who would this executive director be?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "I would be," Edward replied without hesitation. "Someone needs to take the reins while you recover from childbirth and the first few months with the baby. Afterwards we can re-evaluate." "Re-evaluate," Marcella repeated, feeling anger boil beneath her apparent calm. "That's an interesting word for something that seems irreversible on paper." Andrea intervened with a soft voice. "Marcella, I understand this is difficult to process, but as a professional who analyzed the company's finances, I can guarantee that without these changes you could face serious problems. Your father, may God rest his soul, managed in a more traditional way. Times have changed." "Don't you dare!" Marcella raised her voice for the first time. "Don't you dare use my father as an argument. You didn't know him, you don't know what he was capable of." The silence that followed was dense. Dr. Sterling adjusted his glasses uncomfortably. Edward took a long sip of wine. Andrea maintained that cold smile. "Marcella, be sensible," Edward finally said, his voice losing its false gentleness. "This document will be signed one way or another. I'm trying to do this in a civilized manner for the sake of our family, our child." "One way or another," she echoed, feeling nauseous. "That sounds like a threat." "It's a fact," he corrected. Marcella looked at the three faces around the table, the indifferent lawyer merely doing his job, the accountant with her calculating eyes, and her husband, the man with whom she had shared her bed, her dreams, her hopes. The man who now looked at her as an obstacle to be removed. She stood up slowly, resting her, hands on the table. "I will not sign," she said clearly. "Not today, not ever. This company is my blood, my surname, my responsibility, and you will have to go through me before you take it from me." With those words, Marcella left the dining room, ascending the stairs with all the dignity she could muster. Behind her she heard Edward's voice, low and dangerous. "You will regret this." In the bedroom, with the door locked, Marcella finally allowed the tears to fall. But they were not tears of defeat. They were tears of anger, of betrayal, of pain. She had trusted that man. She had given him her heart, her body, had carried his child within her. And now she discovered that it was all just a cold strategy to take what he could never build on his own. The rain began to fall outside, beating against the windows at an increasing rhythm. Lightning illuminated the room in white and bluish flashes. Marcella walked to the window and looked out at the vineyards darkened by the storm. Something inside her had broken that night, but something had also awakened. The girl who had learned from her father to fight for what was hers, the woman who would not bow without resisting. She didn't know yet how, but she would discover what Edward and that woman were planning. She would protect her father's legacy. She would protect her son's future. The war had begun, silent and deadly, within the walls of that house that had seen so many battles over the years. The days that followed were marked by a tension that permeated every room of the house. Edward barely spoke to her, communicating only through cold notes or short messages. He spent more and more time locked in the office, making calls in a low voice, receiving visits from people Marcella didn't know, and Andrea the accountant became a constant presence. She arrived early in the morning with her leather briefcase and impeccable suits and stayed late into the night, closeted with Edward in that office that had once been Marcella's father's sanctuary. Marcella tried on several occasions to enter the meetings to assert her right as owner, but she always found the door locked, always received scornful looks, always heard the same phrase from Edward, "You need to rest. Think about the baby." It was as if he was trying to erase her existence little by little, turning her into a decorative figure, a pregnant belly without voice or will. One afternoon, while Edward had gone out to resolve something in town, Marcella decided to explore the house in a way she hadn't for years. Her feet led her through the wide corridors, through rooms filled with memories, until she reached a room she rarely visited, her father's old library. It was a space Anthony considered sacred, lined with wooden shelves laden with books on viticulture, regional history, classic novels and family albums. Marcella ran her fingers over the spines of the books, feeling the texture of time. And then, high on a shelf, something caught her attention, a small, intermittent red dot, almost imperceptible. She pulled a chair closer, carefully climbed up, and discovered something that made her heart race. An old security camera, the kind her father had installed years ago when there had been a wave of robberies in the area. The device was partially hidden among the books, but the red LED indicated it was active, recording. Marcella didn't know if the other cameras in the house still worked. Her father had always been discreet about the system, but that one was clearly operational. And if it was recording, where was it storing the images? She got down from the chair and began to search. She rummaged through drawers, opened cabinets, until, behind a false wooden panel on the wall, she found a small old DVR, blinking green and red lights. It was recording. It was storing everything. Marcella's heart pounded. That meant there were records. There was proof of who entered and left that office, of what was said, of what was done. But she couldn't simply take those files without raising suspicion. She needed help. She needed someone she could trust. And it was at that moment that she remembered the cellar, the old stone cellar where her father kept the oldest wine barrels, where there was also a small safe he kept for important documents. She had never touched it after his death, respecting that space as an untouched sanctuary. Descending the narrow stairs that led to the house's basement, Marcella felt the air change, becoming colder and laden with the unmistakable scent of aged wood and wine. The barrels were lined up like silent soldiers, witnesses to vintages that spanned decades. At the back of the cellar, covered by an old tarp, was the steel safe with her father's name engraved in golden letters. Marcella had the combination. Her father had given it to her before he died, saying, "If you ever need it, everything that matters is here." At the time, she hadn't fully understood what he meant. Now she turned the numbers with trembling hands, and the safe opened with a metallic click. Inside, there were documents carefully organized in folders, old contracts, certificates, family photos. But at the bottom, in an envelope sealed with red wax, there was something different. Marcella opened it and found a letter, written in her father's firm hand, addressed to her. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the aged paper. "My dearest Marcella," the letter began, "if you are reading this, it means something has happened to me or that you needed to seek answers. I always knew this day would come. Forgive me for not being more direct while I was alive, but I wanted to believe my suspicions were unfounded. Edward Miller is not the man he appears to be. There is something in him that never allowed me to fully trust, an ambition I saw grow since he entered our lives. I conducted some discreet investigations and discovered that he has debts, questionable contacts, and a history of approaching heresies. If you are in danger, if you need protection or help, seek out this man." The name was written below, Gabriel Alden Rock. A phone number and an address in Edinburgh followed. "He was my partner many years ago before you were born. He is someone I trust with my life, and with yours. He will know what to do." Marcella sat on the cold cellar floor, the letter trembling in her hands, tears streaming freely now. Her father knew. He always knew. And he had left a path, a way out, an ally for when she needed it most. From upstairs, she heard the sound of a car arriving. Edward was back. Marcella quickly put the letter back in the envelope, closed the safe and climbed the stairs, wiping away her tears and trying to compose her expression. But now she had something she didn't have before. She had hope. She had a name. She had a direction. And as night fell again over Vineyard Valley, as the house lights came on one by one, and the rain began to drum on the windows again, Marcella made a silent promise. She would not surrender. She would not sign her own defeat. She would fight with all her might, not only for herself, but for the child growing in her womb, for the legacy her father built, and for the truth that was beginning to emerge from the shadows, like the ancient roots of the vineyards, deep, strong, and impossible to uproot. Dawn arrived silently, bringing with it a thick fog that covered the vineyards like a ghostly shroud. Marcella hadn't slept. She had spent the entire night sitting in the armchair in her room, looking out the window, her father's letter held against her chest like an amulet. When the first rays of sun began to pierce the mist, she made a decision. She couldn't wait any longer. She had to act. Edward was still asleep, or feigning sleep, lying on the opposite side of the king-size bed that now seemed an insurmountable abyss between them. Marcella got up carefully, grabbed her cell phone and silently descended the stairs. She went to the back veranda where the signal was better and where no one could hear her. With trembling fingers, she dialed the number her father had left. The phone rang 3 times before a male voice answered. "Hello," said the voice, deep and firm, with a distinct Scottish accent. Marcella took a deep breath. "My name is Marcella Fontaine. I am Anthony Fontaine's daughter." There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by a deep sigh. "Marcella," the voice said, now laden with emotion. "Your father spoke a lot about you. I'm so sorry for your loss. Tony was like a brother. To me." Tears pricked Marcella's eyes. "Thank you. I found a letter from him. He said if I needed help, I should look for you." "What kind of help do you need, my dear?" Gabriel asked, using the affectionate regionalism that sounded like a hug through the phone. Marcella told him everything, about the crumbling marriage, about the document Edward wanted her to sign, about Andrea and her constant presence, about the feeling of being surrounded in her own home, about the cameras she found, about the fear she felt not for herself but for the child she carried. Gabriel listened to everything in silence, only emitting occasional sounds that indicated he was paying attention. When she finished, he said, "Marcella, your father asked me to take care of you if anything happened, and I intend to honor that promise. But I need you to trust me completely. I'll send someone there to install better discrete cameras that can also record conversations. I need proof of what's happening, and you need to act normally, as if nothing has changed. Can you do that?" "I can," she replied, feeling a spark of strength return for the first time in weeks. "Great. And Marcella, one last thing. Don't trust anyone but me, the people I send, and Mr. Jenkins. Your father told me the groundskeeper has always been loyal to the family." "Yes, Mr. Jenkins is like an uncle to me." "Then he will be our ally. I'll send someone today disguised as a technician for electrical system maintenance. Keep your cell phone close and update me on anything strange, especially about this Edward." As she hung up, Marcella felt that she was finally no longer alone in that battle. There was someone on her side, someone her father trusted, someone who would help her unmask the truth. The day passed with a forced normalcy. Edward announced at breakfast that he would need to travel to Edinburgh for meetings with investors and that he would be away for 2 days. Andrea would accompany him. Marcella nodded, feigning indifference, but inside she celebrated. 2 days without them in the house. 2 days to act. As soon as Edward's car disappeared down the dirt road leading to the highway, a discreet van arrived at the estate. 2 young men wearing uniforms from an electrical company got out. Mr. Jenkins received them, and Marcella went down to supervise them. The older of the two, a young man with astute eyes and skillful hands, introduced himself as Roderick. "Gabriel sent us," he simply said. "We're going to install the equipment and then show you how to access the recordings. This will take a few hours, but when we're done, you'll have eyes and ears throughout the house." Marcella led them through the strategic rooms, the office, the dining room, the library, the main corridors. Roderick and his partner worked with silent efficiency, installing micro-cameras so small they were practically invisible, hidden in picture frames, light fixtures, even in fake books. The system was connected to a cloud server, to which only Marcella and Gabriel would have access. When they finished, Roderick showed Marcella how to use the app on her cell phone. "Everything that happens here will be recorded," he explained. "High-definition audio and video, and it's all encrypted. Not even the police would be able to access it without the password." Marcella thanked him, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. She was spying on her own husband in her own home, but what else could she do when he himself was plotting against her? That night, alone in the big house with only Mrs. Eleanor and Mr. Jenkins, Marcella dined with appetite for the first time in weeks. The cook prepared her favorite meal, a cowboy rice with minced beef and garden herbs, and they talked about simple things, about memories of when Marcella was a child and ran barefoot through the vineyards. Mrs. Eleanor, who was almost 70 and knew every secret of that house, looked at Marcella with her tired but kind eyes. "My girl, I saw you grow up. I saw your father build all this with blood and sweat. And I see what's happening now. That man is not good for you, never was." Marcella held the cook's wrinkled hand. "I know, Mrs. Eleanor, and I'm going to do something about it, I promise." The older woman squeezed her hand back. "Your father is watching over you from above, and we down here are too." The 2 days passed in a deceptive calm. Marcella took the opportunity to rest, to talk to the baby growing in her womb, to walk through the vineyards she loved so much. But she also spent hours watching the old camera recordings, discovering things that chilled her blood. Night meetings between Edward and men she didn't know, whispered conversations between him and Andrea that went far beyond the professional, glances, touches, complicit laughter. And worse, detailed plans on how they would take full control of the company as soon as the baby was born, using Marcella's postpartum fragility as an excuse to completely remove her. When Edward and Andrea returned on the evening of the second day, Marcella greeted them with a serene smile. Edward seemed surprised by her change of attitude. "You look better," he commented, leaving his bags in the entrance hall. "Did you rest?" "I rested," she replied. "I had time to think about everything. And I think you're right. Maybe I'm being too dramatic. Can we talk about those documents again?" Edward exchanged a quick glance with Andrea, who smiled discreetly. "Of course we can talk. How about tomorrow?" "Tomorrow is perfect," Marcella said, going up the stairs to the bedroom. As she ascended, she felt their eyes fixed on her back, speculative, suspicious, but also relieved. She was learning to play their game, using their own strategy against them. In the bedroom, she checked the camera app. Downstairs, Edward and Andrea were talking in low voices in the living room. "She's giving in," Andrea's voice echoed through the microphone. "She finally realized she has no choice." "Or she's planning something," Edward replied, suspicious. "Marcella is Anthony's daughter. She's not foolish." "Even if she is, what can she do?" Andrea laughed. "She's pregnant, isolated, with no one to help her. Tomorrow we get the signature and that's it. The company is ours." Marcella closed the app, her heart pounding. They were even worse than she imagined. They weren't just ambitious. They were predators, calculating, willing to use her own condition against her. But she wasn't alone anymore, and they didn't know it yet. The next morning, Marcella woke with an iron determination. She dressed carefully, choosing a dress that made her feel powerful despite her prominent belly. She went down for breakfast, where Edward was already waiting for her, with the document spread on the table next to a golden pen. "I've thought a lot," Marcella said, sitting down, "and I realized that perhaps you are right about some things. The company needs to modernize, but before signing anything, I need to better understand a few points." Edward visibly relaxed. Of course, ask anything you want." Marcella began to ask technical questions about specific clauses, percentages, deadlines. Edward answered with the patience of someone who knows he is about to win. But Marcella wasn't just asking questions. She was recording every word, every admission, every detail he revealed about the true plans for the company. After almost 2 hours of conversation, she finally picked up the pen. Edward held his breath. And then Marcella said, "You know, Edward, I still don't feel comfortable signing today. I need to consult my own lawyer first. You understand, don't you? It's just prudent." Edward's expression changed instantly, from hopeful to furious. "What lawyer? You don't have a lawyer and you don't need one. I'm here to take care of everything." "Precisely because of that," she replied calmly. "Because you are taking care of everything, I need someone to specifically take care of my interests. It's just good business sense, something you yourself have always advocated." Edward slammed his hand on the table, making the coffee cups rattle. "Enough of this stalling, Marcella. You're going to sign this document today now." "Or what?" she asked, slowly standing up, her hand protectively on her belly. "Are you going to force me? Are you going to threaten me? In front of Mrs. Eleanor, who is in the kitchen, in front of Mr. Jenkins, who is outside?" Edward walked around the table, approaching with heavy steps. His eyes had an intensity Marcella had never seen before, something wild and dangerous. "You don't know who you're messing with," he said in a low voice. "I haven't spent years planning this only to be stopped by your stubbornness." "So it's true," Marcella said, feeling her legs tremble but keeping her voice firm. "Everything was planned, from the beginning. The marriage, the pregnancy. Everything was just a strategy to take what is mine." "Ours," he corrected. "What is ours? You are my wife. You carry my child. Everything that is yours is mine too." Marcella laughed, a joyless sound. "That's your mistake, Edward. To think that I am just a path to what you want. But I am the fontaine here. This land, this wine, this legacy, they run in my veins, and you will never take that from me. If you were living in this story, what would be your reaction upon discovering that your marriage was based on lies and ambition? Comment your opinion below." Edward advanced, but at that exact moment the living room door opened. Andrea entered, carrying more documents, but stopped upon seeing the scene. "What's happening here?" she asked. "Marcella is being difficult," Edward replied without taking his eyes off his wife, "but she will learn to cooperate." Andrea approached, and for the first time Marcella clearly saw the true nature of that woman. She wasn't just a contracted accountant. There was something deeper there, a complicity that went beyond the professional. "Marcella," Andrea said with false sweetness, "you need to think about your baby. Stress is not good. Sign the papers and everything will be easier." Marcella felt the world spin. The betrayal was complete, total, on every possible level. "Get out of my house," she said, her voice coming out as a cutting whisper. "Both of you, now." "This is my house too," Edward retorted. "I'm your husband, in case you forgot." "Not for much longer," Marcella replied. "I want a divorce, and I want you out of here today." Edward took a step forward, invading Marcella's personal space in an intimidating way. "You won't divorce me, you won't kick me out, and you will sign these documents, because if you don't, I will make your life a living hell. I will sue you, I will claim you are mentally incapacitated because of your pregnancy. I will do whatever it takes to have what is rightfully mine." "Rightfully mine," Marcella echoed, feeling anger rise like lava. "You have no right to anything. None of this is yours. You are an opportunist, a liar, a traitor." The slap Edward delivered to her face echoed through the room like a gunshot. Marcella staggered, her hand flying to her stinging face, her eyes wide with shock. He had hit her. For the first time in 3 years of marriage, he had crossed that line. Edward seemed surprised by his own action, taking a step back. "Marcella, he began, but didn't finish. Because at that moment, Mr. Jenkins ran in through the back door, drawn by the sound of the argument. He saw Marcella's red face, saw Edward's stance, and immediately understood what had happened. The 60-year-old man advanced with surprising agility, placing himself between Marcella and Edward. "You laid a hand on her," Mr. Jenkins said, his voice trembling with contained fury. "You hit my boss's daughter, my girl." "Get out of the way, old man," Edward ordered. "This is none of your business." "It is my business," Mr. Jenkins retorted. "I've worked for the Fontaine family for 35 years. I saw this girl born, and I won't let you hurt her." Andrea tried to intervene. "Let's all calm down. This got out of hand. Edward, we agreed there would be no violence." "So you agreed," Marcella said, her voice strangely calm now. "You planned everything. How far you would go, how far you could push me. But apparently Edward can't control himself when he doesn't get what he wants." "Marcella," Edward said, trying a conciliatory tone now. "I'm sorry. It was a moment of anger. It wasn't my intention. You know I love you." "Love," Marcella said, touching her still burning face. "You don't know the meaning of that word. Love doesn't manipulate, love doesn't betray, love doesn't hit." She turned to Mr. Jenkins. "Call the police. I want this recorded. I want a protective order against him." Edward laughed, but it was a nervous laugh. "You think the police will do anything? It will be your word against mine, and I am much more convincing than you." "But it won't just be her word," a new voice said from the door. Everyone turned. Gabriel Alden Rock stood at the entrance to the living room, tall, broad-shouldered, about 50 years old, but with the presence of someone who commanded respect. Beside him were two other equally imposing men. "Who the hell are you?" Edward demanded to know. "I am someone Anthony Fontaine asked to take care of his daughter," Gabriel replied. "And I am also someone who has recordings of everything that has happened here in recent days. Your conversations with this woman here, your plans, your threats, and now physical aggression. Everything recorded, everything documented." Edward's face paled. "You're bluffing." Gabriel pulled out his cell phone and tapped the screen. Immediately, Edward's voice filled the room, coming from the recording. "I will make your life a living hell. I will sue you. I will claim you are mentally incapacitated." Then, the sound of the slap, clear and unmistakable. Edward looked at Marcella with a mix of hatred and fear. "You set a trap for me. You were recording everything." "I was protecting myself," Marcella corrected, "because I knew you were capable of anything." "And I was right." Gabriel approached, placing himself protectively beside Marcella. "Now, Edward Miller, you have two options. You can leave this house voluntarily now, renouncing any claim over the company and the Fontaine family assets, or I can send these recordings to the police, to the media, to all the business contacts you have. Your choice." Edward looked around the room, at Andrea, who now seemed to want to disappear, at Mr. Jenkins, who stared at him with contempt, at Gabriel and his men who blocked the exit, and finally at Marcella. The woman he had tried to destroy stood, tall, her hand on her belly, her eyes dry but burning with determination. "This isn't over," Edward said, but his voice had lost all strength. He grabbed his car keys and left the room, slamming the door shut. Andrea quickly followed him, without looking back, her high heels clacking down the corridor. When the sound of the car driving away finally disappeared, Marcella felt her legs give way. Gabriel supported her, helping her to sit on the sofa. "Are you okay?" he asked, concerned. "I am," she replied, though she was trembling all over. "Thank you. If you hadn't arrived." "I promised your father I would take care of you," Gabriel said gently, "and I always keep my promises. But this isn't over yet, Marcella. Men like Edward don't give up easily. We need to prepare for his next move." Marcella nodded, touching her still sore face. She knew he was right. The battle was just beginning. But for the first time since it all began, she felt she had a real chance to win. Because she was no longer alone, and because she had finally understood a fundamental truth, she was stronger than anyone imagined, including herself. The following days were a roller coaster of emotions and difficult decisions. Marcella, with the support of Gabriel and his team, moved quickly to protect her interests. One of the men Gabriel had brought was a lawyer specializing in family and corporate law, Dr. Henry Brooks, who immediately began working on divorce documents and legal measures to remove Edward from any position in the company. The house, which once felt like a prison, began to transform back into the home Marcella remembered from childhood. Gabriel installed discreet security on the property, trained men who were on standby 24 hours a day, not because they expected physical violence, but because they knew Edward was unpredictable and desperate. During these days, Marcella discovered more about Gabriel and his connection to her father. They had been friends since youth, building the winery's first businesses together. Gabriel had moved away years ago to take care of his own family and other ventures, but his friendship with Anthony remained solid until the end. He had 3 sons, all involved in different legitimate businesses, and a wife who had passed away a few years ago from cancer. There was an old sadness in his eyes, but also a strength that inspired confidence. One afternoon, while having coffee on the veranda, Gabriel told Marcella about the last conversation he had with Anthony. "It was 2 weeks before he died," Gabriel said, looking at the vineyards that stretched as far as the eye could see. "He already knew he didn't have much time, and he told me that his greatest concern wasn't leaving the business, but leaving you, especially because he realized that Edward was not who he pretended to be." "Why didn't my father tell me?" Marcella asked, her voice laden with hurt. "Why didn't he warn me directly?" Gabriel sighed. "Because he was a father, Marcella, and fathers want to believe they are wrong when it comes to their children's happiness. He was afraid you would see him as a controlling father-in-law, that you would choose Edward over him. So he preferred to leave clues, to leave paths for you to discover the truth yourself if necessary. He trusted you more than you imagine." Tears streamed down Marcella's face. "I miss him so much. Especially now. He would know exactly what to do." "He left you prepared to do what needs to be done," Gabriel said gently. "You are more like him than you think. You have the same strength, the same determination, and you are not alone." Meanwhile, Edward had not been quiet. He had hired his own lawyers, expensive men from Edinburgh, and had started a smear campaign against Marcella. He spread to the winery's suppliers and clients that she was emotionally unstable due to pregnancy, that she was making irrational decisions, that she was being manipulated by strangers who wanted to take control of the business. Some old clients who had known the Fontaine family for decades did not listen, but others, less loyal, began to question, to hesitate in closing new contracts. Marcella needed to do something she never imagined necessary: call a meeting with all the winery's main business partners. It was a September day, with a blue sky and the still chilly air of the Scottish spring. In the winery's event hall, which was normally used for tastings and celebrations, more than 50 people gathered, including distributors, retailers, sommeliers, and representatives of renowned restaurants. Marcella entered the hall with Gabriel by her side, wearing an elegant outfit that accommodated her 7-month belly. She felt all eyes on her, some curious, others concerned, some even hostile. She took a deep breath and walked to the small stage set up at the back of the room. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice clear and firm despite her nerves. "I know that in recent days you have heard many things about me and about the Fontaine Estate Winery. I came here today to tell the truth personally, looking into the eyes of everyone who helped build this legacy alongside my family." She told everything, with a brutal honesty that left many in the audience visibly uncomfortable. She spoke about how Edward had entered her life with ulterior motives, about how he had tried to manipulate her to gain control of the company, about the personal and professional betrayal. She did not go into sordid details. She maintained her dignity, but she was clear about the facts. "My father," she said, her voice choked but firm, "built this winery with integrity. Every bottle that leaves here carries not just wine, but history, honest work, passion for the land. I will not let that be stained by ambition and greed. I am taking the necessary legal measures to protect what is ours, what is yours too, because without the trust you place in us, none of this would exist." When she finished, there was a heavy silence. Then a grey-haired man stood up. It was Stephen Martin, owner of one of the country's largest wine importers and a long-time friend of Anthony. "Marcella," he said with his heavy Italian accent, "your father was my friend for 40 years. I saw him build all this, and I see him in you now. You have my full and unrestricted support." One by one, others also stood up, declaring support, offering help, reaffirming contracts. Not all of them did, some still hesitated, but most stayed. And that gave Marcella the strength she needed to keep fighting. That night, exhausted but relieved, Marcella was getting ready for bed when her cell phone rang. It was an unknown number. She hesitated, but answered. "Marcella." Edward's voice came from the other side, tense and different. "We need to talk." "We have nothing to talk about," she replied, about to hang up. "It's about the baby," he said quickly. "Please, just 5 minutes. I won't bother you again after this." Marcella looked out the window, seeing the security lights patrolling the property. "Where do you want to talk?" "Tomorrow morning at the old chapel on the property line, 10 o'clock, alone, please." The old chapel was a small stone construction on the edge of the Fontaine estate, abandoned for years but still standing, a relic from the times when the family prayed there every Sunday. It was a neutral place without painful memories. Marcella knew it was risky, but a part of her, the part that still remembered the man she had fallen in love with, wanted to hear what he had to say. "I'll go," she agreed, "but Gabriel will know where I am, and there will be people nearby. Anything strange and it's over." "I just want to talk," Edward said, and hung up. Marcella told Gabriel about the meeting. He didn't like it. "It's a trap," he said categorically. "He wants to catch you alone to pressure you." "That's why you'll be close," Marcella replied, "with your men, but I need to hear what he has to say. I need closure, Gabriel. I need to look at him and know that I did everything I could." Gabriel finally agreed, but only under strict conditions. He and 2 of his men would be hidden near the chapel. Marcella would wear a hidden microphone to record everything, and at the first sign of danger, they would intervene. The next morning, Marcella drove her pickup truck down the dirt road that led to the chapel. The day was cloudy, with heavy clouds that promised rain. The stone structure appeared on the horizon, small and solitary in the middle of the field. Edward's car was already parked there. He stood at the chapel door, wearing jeans and a simple shirt, without his usual elegance. He looked tired, older than his 36 years. When Marcella got out of the pickup truck, he took a step forward but stopped upon seeing her expression. "Thank you for coming," he said. "You have 5 minutes," Marcella replied, checking her watch. "Speak." Edward took a deep breath. "I messed everything up," he began. "I know I messed up, and I know there's no excuse for what I did, but I need you to know that not everything was a lie, Marcella. When I met you, yes, I had ulterior motives, but along the way, I genuinely fell in love. You are incredible, strong, intelligent, passionate, and I didn't know how to deal with that, with someone so much better than me." Marcella crossed her arms, protecting her belly. "Is this your attempt at an apology? To say you loved me while plotting to destroy me?" "I didn't want to destroy you," Edward protested. "I wanted to build something. I wanted to prove I was capable of being worthy of you, but I went down the wrong path. I let my ambitions speak louder. And Andrea, she just took advantage of my weakness." "Don't blame her," Marcella said coldly. "You made your choices. You hit me, Edward. You crossed a line of no return." He closed his eyes, seeming to feel physical pain. "I know, and I will live with that for the rest of my life. But I came here to ask you one thing. Don't take away my right to know my son. I don't deserve you, I know. But this baby is mine too." Marcella felt a pang of something, perhaps pity, perhaps just sadness for the waste of everything that could have been. Edward, a child, needs a father who is an example, someone who is honest, upright, trustworthy. You need to become that man before you have the right to be in his life, and that will take time, a lot of time. "I can change," he said, taking a step forward. "Give me a chance to change." Marcella shook her head. "It's not to me you have to prove yourself. It's to yourself. And after some time, if you truly change, perhaps we can talk about supervised visitation. But for now, I want distance. I need it." Edward seemed about to argue, but then something in his expression changed. He looked past her, towards the road, and Marcella realized they were no longer alone. An unknown car was approaching at high speed, kicking up dust. "Who is it?" Marcella asked, turning. "I don't know," Edward replied, looking genuinely surprised. The car stopped abruptly, and Andrea got out, visibly agitated. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, and she carried a folder of documents against her chest. "Edward, what are you doing?" she yelled, marching towards them. "We agreed we weren't going to talk to her anymore." "Andrea, what are you doing here?" Edward asked, looking as confused as Marcella. "Trying to save what's left of our plan," she replied sharply. "But I see you're here playing the role of a repentant victim. Pathetic." Marcella looked from one to the other. "Are you two still in this together? Are you still trying something?" Andrea laughed, but it was a humorless sound. "Oh, dearest Marcella, do you really think Edward here is the mastermind behind everything? He's just a pawn. A handsome and useful pawn, but a pawn nonetheless." "What are you talking about?" Edward demanded to know. Andrea turned to him. "Do you really think it was your idea to approach her?" "It was my idea, Edward. I saw the opportunity. Young heiress, vulnerable, lonely, with a sick father. I put you in her path. I planned every step. and you were too foolish to realize you were being used too." Edward turned pale. "You're lying." "I'm telling the truth for the first time," Andrea retorted. "I'm tired of this game. I'm tired of pretending you have any power, and I'm tired of waiting for things to happen. So I came here to finish the job." She opened the folder and pulled out something that made Marcella's blood run cold. They were documents, but not the same as before. These had forged signatures, official stamps, and seemed to transfer parts of the company to a holding company in Andrea's name. "You forged documents," Marcella said, the shock evident in her voice. "That's a crime." "And who's going to prove it?" Andrea challenged. "I have contacts, Marcella. I have people who can validate these documents as legitimate, and when this goes to court it will be your word against a stack of official paperwork. Good luck proving fraud." Edward tried to grab the documents, but Andrea pulled away. "You've gone mad," he said. "This will put us in prison." "It will put you in prison," she corrected. "Because all these documents bear your signature, Edward, not mine. I was very careful about that. If this blows up, you're the perfect scapegoat. The greedy husband who betrayed his pregnant wife to steal her company. I'm just the accountant who was deceived by you." At that moment, Marcella understood the true extent of the manipulation. Edward was not the main villain. He was just another victim, as manipulated as she was, just in a different way. The real threat had always been Andrea, the woman who had plotted everything with a calculating coldness that was almost admirable in its cruelty. "You won't succeed," Marcella said, trying to keep her voice calm. "Gabriel has recordings of everything. Your conversations with Edward, your plans, everything." Andrea smiled. "Oh yes, the mysterious Gabriel, the savior who appeared out of nowhere. But listen, Marcella, recordings can be contested. They can be considered illegally obtained. They can be dismissed in court. But official documents, with stamps and signatures, those are harder to dispute." She started to go back to the car, but Edward grabbed her arm. "You're not leaving here with those papers," he said, with a determination Marcella had never seen in him before. "Let me go," Andrea ordered, trying to free herself from his grip. The argument between them escalated rapidly, voices rising, hands pushing. Marcella took a step back, feeling a sudden contraction in her womb that made her double over in pain. It wasn't time yet. The baby shouldn't be born for another 2 months, but the stress was taking its toll. "Gabriel," she called, touching the hidden microphone. "I need help." But things were happening too fast. Edward and Andrea fought over the documents, pulling and pushing. Marcella tried to approach to separate them, but another contraction came, stronger, and she cried out in pain. Edward turned at the sound of her scream, letting go of Andrea and running to Marcella. In that moment of distraction, Andrea took advantage. She pushed Edward hard, making him stumble, but Edward, as he fell, instinctively grabbed onto what was closest, which was Marcella. His weight pulled her, unbalancing her. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion. Marcella felt her feet slip on the damp grass, felt the world spin, felt the inevitable impact as she fell onto the old stones of the chapel path. The pain that exploded in her body was unlike anything she had ever felt. It was not just physical, but visceral, a primal fear that something terrible was happening to the baby. She heard voices screaming her name, felt hands trying to help her, but everything seemed distant, filtered through layers of fog and pain. Gabriel and his men arrived running, taking in the scene of Marcella on the ground, Edward in a panic beside her trying to help, and Andrea standing a few meters away, the documents scattered around her, her face a mask of horror. "Call an ambulance," Gabriel shouted, kneeling beside Marcella. "Now!" Marcella tried to speak, but another wave of pain hit her. She looked down and saw blood, a lot of blood, staining her light dress. The world began to darken at the edges, and the last thing she saw before everything went black was Gabriel's face, speaking words she could no longer hear, promising things she wasn't sure she believed. And then nothing. Only darkness and the distant sound of sirens approaching through the hills of Vineyard Valley. The sound of the heart monitors was rhythmic, almost hypnotic, filling the silence of the hospital room. Marcella floated somewhere between consciousness and oblivion, hearing voices that seemed to come from very far away. Some were familiar, others unknown, but all carried the same tone of urgency and concern. When she finally opened her eyes, the white light of the ceiling blinded her for a moment. She blinked several times until the shapes around her began to make sense. She was in a hospital room surrounded by machines and tubes, and beside her, sitting in an uncomfortable chair, was Gabriel, with deep dark circles under his eyes and an exhausted expression. "You're awake," he said, immediately standing up and approaching. "Thank God. How are you? Feeling?" Marcella tried to speak, but her throat was dry. Gabriel quickly grabbed a glass of water with a straw and helped her drink. After a few sips, she managed to whisper, "The baby." Gabriel's expression softened. "He's fine. It was difficult, very difficult, but he's alive. He was born prematurely, an emergency, but the doctors say he's a fighter. He's in the neonatal ICU, but stable." Tears streamed down Marcella's face, a mix of relief and exhaustion. "Can I see him?" "Soon," Gabriel promised. "You had complications. You lost a lot of blood. They had to perform emergency surgery. You were unconscious for 2 days. 2 days, Marcella repeated, processing the information. "What happened? After I fell?" Gabriel sighed deeply. "A lot. But first, you need to know that you are safe. Edward and Andrea are in police custody. The recordings we had, plus the testimony of what happened, plus the forged documents Andrea was carrying, gave the authorities more than enough to temporarily arrest them." Marcella closed her eyes, feeling a wave of conflicting emotions. Relief, anger, sadness, all mixed in a whirlwind that was difficult to process. "I lost a lot, didn't I?" "You almost lost." "Everything," Gabriel corrected gently. "But you didn't lose. You are here, alive. Your son is alive, and the truth has finally come to light." In the following hours, Gabriel told her everything that had happened while she was unconscious. How the ambulance arrived quickly thanks to the already alert security guards. How the medical team at St. Catherine's Hospital, Edinburgh, worked for hours to save mother and child. How the baby was born weighing only 1.5 kilograms, tiny and fragile, but with lungs that cried out strongly announcing his arrival into the world. How Edward had an emotional collapse at the hospital, needing sedation. How Andrea tried to flee but was intercepted by one of Gabriel's men with all the forged documents in hand. "The media picked up the story," Gabriel continued. "A scandal involving one of Scotland's most traditional wineries, betrayal, forgery of documents. It's in all the newspapers. But don't worry, Dr. Henry Brooks and I are controlling the narrative. The truth is being told the right way." Marcella looked out the room's window, seeing the blue sky of a September afternoon. "I want to see my son," she said with renewed determination. "Now." It took some time to prepare everything, get a hospital wheelchair, coordinate with the medical team, but finally Marcella was taken to the neonatal ICU. She had to put on a gown, mask, and wash her hands carefully. And then, through the glass of an incubator, she saw him for the first time. He was so small he could fit in the palm of a hand, with tubes and wires connected to his fragile little body. But he was alive. His chest rose and fell regularly, his tiny eyes closed, his little fists clenched as if ready to fight. The nurse smiled at Marcella. "He's strong," she said. "Stronger than he looks. He's already overcome the first critical 48 hours." Marcella touched the glass with her fingertips, as if she could transmit love through the transparent barrier. "Anthony," she whispered. "His name is Anthony, like his grandfather." Days in the hospital turned into weeks. Marcella recovered slowly but with determination. Meanwhile, little Anthony fought his own battle in the incubator, gaining precious grams each day, learning to breathe on his own to maintain his temperature, to suckle the breast milk Marcella religiously pumped every 3 hours. During this time, the legal process against Edward and Andrea advanced rapidly. Dr. Henry Brooks built a solid case, audio and video recordings showing the conspiratorial conversations, forged documents with graphological expertise confirming the fraud, testimonies from Mr. Jenkins and Gabriel's men about what happened at the chapel, bank records showing suspicious money movements. Edward, confronted with all the evidence and the reality of what almost happened, decided to cooperate. His lawyer negotiated a deal where he would confess everything in exchange for a reduced sentence. He admitted that he had been manipulated by Andrea from the beginning, but that he was also guilty of his own choices. He relinquished any claim over the Fontaine Estate winery and over any of Marcella's inheritance. As for his rights regarding the child, it was agreed that he would have supervised visitation only after completing a psychological rehabilitation program and demonstrating genuine change. Andrea, on the other hand, fought to the end. She hired expensive lawyers, tried to discredit the evidence, claimed that Edward was the real culprit and that she was just a professional doing her job. But the evidence was too overwhelming. The forged documents had her fingerprints. The recordings clearly showed that she was the mastermind of the plan, and even Edward testified against her. A month after Anthony's birth, when the baby was finally strong enough to be discharged, Marcella was invited to a press conference. Dr. Henry Brooks suggested it, and Gabriel supported it. It was time for Marcella to tell her own story, to regain control of the narrative, to show the world that she was not a victim, but a survivor. The press conference was held in the main hall of the Fontaine Estate winery, the same place where weeks ago she had gathered the business partners. But this time there were cameras, reporters, microphones. Marcella was nervous but determined. She wore an elegant blue outfit, held a photo of little Anthony in her hands, and stepped onto the stage. "My name is Marcella Fontaine," she began, her clear voice echoing through the silent hall. "And I came here today to tell my story, not as a victim but as a woman who faced the deepest betrayal and chose to fight for the truth." She told everything, with brutal honesty, but without excessive dramatization. She spoke about how she met Edward, about how he manipulated her trust about the plan to take over the company her father built. She spoke about Andrea and her web of lies. She spoke about the fall, about the premature birth of her son, about the weeks of uncertainty. And she spoke about the strength she found to continue, inspired by the memory of her father and the love for her son who fought to live. "Many may ask why I am exposing this publicly," she said, looking directly at the cameras, "because I cannot be the only one. I know there are other women out there, facing manipulation, psychological abuse, men who approach them out of self-interest, and I want them to know that they are not alone, that it is possible to fight, that it is possible to win." She then announced something she had been planning with Gabriel in recent weeks. "I am using part of my father's inheritance to create the Anthony Fontaine Institute, dedicated to helping women victims of psychological manipulation and emotional abuse. We will offer legal, psychological, and financial support for women who need to leave toxic relationships but lack resources. And the headquarters will be here on this estate because this place that has seen so much pain will now be a symbol of hope and new beginnings." The reaction was instant and powerful. Applause echoed through the hall. Reporters asked questions that Marcella answered with honesty and grace. And when the press conference ended, she felt that she had finally turned the page, that the dark chapter of her life was closing and a new one was beginning. In the following months, life gradually resumed a new rhythm. Little Anthony grew strong and healthy, overcoming each developmental milestone with the determination of a warrior. His dark eyes were identical to his grandfather's, and Marcella saw in them a promise of the future. Andrea's trial was swift and conclusive. She was convicted of document forgery, attempted fraud, and several other related crimes. The sentence was 7 years in prison. Edward received 3 years, but with the possibility of parole after 18 months if he demonstrated good conduct and completed the agreed-upon rehabilitation programs. Marcella felt no joy at the convictions, only a sense of justice being served. She had more important things to focus on now. The Fontaine Estate winery flourished under her renewed management, with Gabriel as an advisor and some of his sons taking on strategic positions. The business modernized while maintaining its traditional essence. A new special vintage was launched, named Resistance, in honor of Marcella's journey. Each bottle bore a seal with the story of the Anthony Fontaine Institute, and part of the profits was donated to the cause. The institute became a reality 6 months after the press conference. The east wing of the main house was renovated to house offices for volunteer lawyers and psychologists. Rooms were adapted to temporarily accommodate women who needed to leave their homes in a hurry. Mrs. Eleanor commanded the kitchen that now fed not only the family but all the women who found refuge there. Marcella discovered a purpose that went beyond the winery. She became a spokesperson for the cause, giving lectures, participating in podcasts, writing articles. She shared her story not to seek pity, but to inspire strength. And the response was overwhelming. Hundreds of women contacted her, sharing their own stories, seeking help, offering support. On a particularly beautiful spring day, almost a year after Anthony's birth, Marcella was in the vineyards with her son in her arms. He was almost a year old, plump and healthy, drooling on one of the leaves he was trying to grasp. Gabriel approached, bringing news. "Edward asked to see you," he said. "He wants to talk to you and meet Anthony. He completed all the programs, has regular psychological counseling, and the reports are positive, but the decision is yours." Marcella looked at her son, thinking, was she ready for this? Could she forgive enough to allow Edward to be a part of the boy's life, even minimally? "I'll think about it," she finally said. "It's not a no, but it's not a yes either. I need to be sure it's best for Anthony, not for me or for him." Gabriel nodded, respecting her decision. "You are a wise woman, Marcella. Your father would be proud." Marcella smiled, feeling tears prick her eyes. "I keep wondering if he knew. If somehow he knew all this was going to happen, and that's why he left those paths for me to follow." "He knew you," Gabriel replied. "He knew you were strong enough to face any storm, and that you had a heart big enough not to let bitterness destroy you." That night, Marcella put Anthony to sleep in his crib, now installed in what had been her grandfather's room. She quietly sang the same lullaby her father used to sing to her as a child, about vineyards and harvests, about the nurturing land and the blessing rain. Afterwards, she went down to the library, where everything had begun. The old camera she had discovered months ago was still there, now deactivated but preserved as a memento. She picked up an old photo album and leafed through the pages, yellowed by time. Her great-grandfather planting the first vines, her grandfather expanding the estate, her father young and strong holding a glass of wine with pride, and now she holding her own son, continuing the legacy but in a new, more inclusive, more compassionate way. Marcella took a sheet of paper and began to write a letter to Anthony, for him to read when he was older. She told him about the grandfather he would never know, but whose spirit lived in every vine of that place. She told him about the challenges she faced, not to scare him, but to teach him that life is sometimes difficult, but that it is always worth fighting for what is right. And she told him about love, about how true. Love does not manipulate, does not betray, does not hurt, but elevates, supports, and strengthens. When she finished the letter, she sealed it in an envelope and put it in the same safe where she had found her father's letter. Someday, when Anthony was a man, he would read it and understand where he came from and why it was important to follow the path of integrity. Months turned into years. The Anthony Fontaine Institute helped hundreds of women rebuild their lives. The Fontaine Estate Winery won international awards, not only for the quality of its wines but also for its social commitment. And Marcella became not only a respected businesswoman, but an important voice in the fight against psychological abuse and emotional manipulation. She eventually allowed Edward supervised contact with Anthony, not out of easy forgiveness, but because she saw genuine change in him. Edward would never be her partner again, never have her love or complete trust, but he could be a present father to their son, as long as he respected the established boundaries. As for Marcella, she discovered that she didn't need a man to feel complete. She had her son, she had her purpose, she had her land and her legacy. If love were to come again someday, it would be welcome, but she wouldn't desperately seek it. She had learned that the only person who needed to complete her life was herself. On a March day, exactly 3 years after that fateful night when everything began, Marcella organized a big party at the winery. It was a celebration of the new vintage, but also the 3rd anniversary of the Institute. Hundreds of people came, including many of the women who had been helped by the program. Marcella climbed onto a small stage set up among the vineyards, holding the hand of Anthony, now a talkative and curious boy of almost 3 years old. She looked at the crowd and felt deep gratitude. "When my father planted these vines," she said, "he didn't know he was planting much more than grapes. He was planting hope. He was planting legacy. He was planting the seed of something that would grow and spread far beyond this property. And today, looking at all of you, I see that this seed has blossomed in ways he never imagined." She raised a glass of resistance wine. "I toast to my father who taught me to fight. I toast to my son who taught me the true meaning of unconditional love. And I toast to all the women here who prove every day that we are stronger than any storm life can bring." The sun set over Vineyard Valley, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The vineyards stretched in perfect rows, their leaves dancing in the gentle breeze, and in the center of it all, Marcella Fontaine stood, a woman who had been betrayed, wounded, almost destroyed, but who chose not to be defined by her pain. She chose to be defined by her resilience, by her compassion, by her determination to transform tragedy into purpose. And as she watched the people around her, celebrating, laughing, sharing stories of overcoming adversity, she knew that she had honored her father's legacy in the best possible way, not just by preserving the winery, but by expanding its meaning, not just by making wine, but by cultivating hope, not just by surviving, but by truly living. And when night finally fell over the vineyards, bringing with it the sparkle of stars and the song of crickets, Marcella picked up her son and walked back to the big house. That house that had witnessed so much suffering, but that now echoed with children's laughter and conversations of women who had found a new beginning there. The legacy of Anthony Fontaine was secure, not just in his daughter's capable hands, but in the heart of every person that family had touched, and the wine would continue to flow from the barrels, but now each drop carried not only tradition, but also the promise that it is always possible to start anew, always possible to transform pain into strength, and always possible to choose to write a different ending to our own story. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope that Marcella's story and her journey of overcoming adversity has deeply touched your heart. If you were moved by this narrative of resilience, courage, and rebirth, please like, subscribe to our channel, and tell us in the comments what stood out to you most in this story. Every day, we bring intense stories like this, which reveal the deepest side of the human soul, showing that even in the darkest moments there is always a light of hope waiting to shine. Marcella's story teaches us that we are stronger than we imagine, that true love begins within ourselves, and that every painful ending can be the beginning of something extraordinary. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode with another story that will stir your emotions and make you reflect on the strength that exists within each of us.